What do you do then? So of course there's many questions, as I brought up a few. They're very practical questions. Like I said, many people ask me all the time, and hopefully we will answer most of the questions in this article, which is by Rabbi Zusha Wilhelm, What's in a Name? The first thing an individual receives in life that is truly his own, separating him from others, is a name. In Jewish tradition, much importance is attached to names, as a name serves not only as a method of identification, but also as a blessed symbol suggesting a spiritual connection between itself and the person who bears it. Now, this concept is stressed several times in the Bible, as illustrated during the encounter between Jacob the patriarch and the angel. The angel asks Jacob his name, and when Jacob replies, he is informed by the angel that from that time forward he will be known as Israel. A baby boy is named during the bris milah, or the circumcision ceremony, and a girl, when her father receives an aliyah, called to the Torah. Although a name is designated by one's parents of their own free will, it is understood that the name must also be sanctioned by the heavens, and from that point on to eternity, the person shall be known by this name. The name will be used at the time of bar mitzvah. It will appear on the person's marriage license, and it will accompany the individual his entire lifetime, through sadness and joy. And it will be repeated after his death during Kaddish and Yizkor. Jewish names are mentioned often in prayer. When a person is sick, we pray for their recovery, repeating their name along with that of their parents. When someone is in critical condition, a new name is added to the prayer. It is believed that the change in name will cause a certain change in the person, which in turn will transform him or her condition. Couples, when deciding upon a name for their children, often select of someone who was once dear to them. This common practice is based on the fact that the Torah states, no one will be erased from Israel. Thus, children are often named after great scholars, righteous members of the generation, those whose exemplary lives have been dedicated to holiness and good deeds. Based on the commandment to honor one's father and mother, the Ashkenazi custom of naming a child after a deceased parent has developed. This bestows great spiritual pleasure upon the soul of the departed, all the more so if the child conducts himself in a worthy manner by preserving the heritage of his forefathers. Unfortunately, today, too many Jewish children are either unaware or embarrassed by their Jewish names, choosing instead to be addressed by non-Jewish names. Our sages have stated that our fathers were redeemed from Egypt because they refused to deny their Jewish heritage and continued to call themselves Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and so on. Jewish names can be categorized in the following manner. A. Biblical names, names mentioned in the 5 books of Moses or in the book of prophets. B. Talmudic names, names that originate in the Talmud and Medrash. And C. Names whose sources lie in nature, names of animals, many already mentioned in the Bible, such as Chava, Devorah, Tzipora, Yonah. Names of trees and flowers, some of which are also mentioned in the Bible, such as Tamar. Others are Shoshana, Elon, Oren, Orna, and Aviva. Names of people that are based on animals, though not found in the Bible, like Aryeh, Tzvi, and Zev, are derived from the blessings given by Jacob and Moses, who called the tribes by names of different animals. D. Names which have had in them God's names like Emmanuel, Gedaliah, Samuel, and Isaiah. Others' name is Yehuda, express gratitude to God. And F. Names of angels that were adopted as people's names, such as Michael, Raphael, and Gabriel. And G. Accompanying names which were added to the main name, but sometimes used by themselves. The name is the life source. It is explained in many books that the name given to a person is connected with one's very soul and life, meaning the channel through which its life force flows to the body. Each letter is imbued with a unique divine force. Thus, every created object has its own form, its own special essence that is intrinsically connected to the letters that make up its name. So too the life that enters one's soul while in a physical body flows from the letters that form the person's name. The Medrash tells us that God told the angels that Adam's wisdom was greater than theirs, since he was able to recognize the spiritual source of every animal Thus he was able to name all the animals with their proper Hebrew name. It is also mentioned in the books that when we want to wake a person who has fainted, we should call him by his Jewish name. As this awakens his life source and returns his soul to his body, causing him to stir. The influence of a name. The Talmud offers numerous examples that demonstrate the kind of influence a name might have on a person's character. Rabbi Meir used to ask someone his name before engaging in any kind of dealings with him. Rabbi Joseph Karo, authored the Code of Jewish Law, states that one who is called Abraham will naturally incline to do good, while one called Joseph is likely to feed others, both in the physical and spiritual sense, just as Joseph did in Egypt. Now here are some important laws concerning naming of children. Only the father and the mother have the right to name a child. It is written in the writings of Arizal, Rabbi Isaac Luria, that when a child is born, God places the appropriate name corresponding to the soul in the parent's mouth. Although the merit to give the names alternates between the father and the mother, there are different customs as to who has the merit to name the first child. Consult your local rabbi as to the custom you should follow. It is not proper to discuss the name of the child before the child is born. Neither should the child's name be registered before the circumcision or naming at the Torah reading. When a girl is born, it is proper to name her at the first opportunity when there is a reading of the Torah, Monday, Thursday, or Shabbos in the morning. It is proper to make a special meal in honor of the naming of a girl. The Ashkenazi custom is not to name a child after a living person, while in the Sephardic tradition it is considered a great honor to the father to name the child after the father's name. Although this practice is not common anymore, Yemenite Jews still name their child after their father's name. If both sets of grandfathers have the same name and one of them died, it is not proper to name the child after the grandfather if the living father would feel offended. It became popular in the last century to give a child two names. It is usually done when one is very sick and a name is added to him, as we find with Sarah the matriarch, whose name was changed from Sarai to Sarah before she gave birth to Isaac. If one had in mind to name a child with a certain name, but the father accidentally told the Moel, the rabbi performing the circumcision, a different name, it is proper to leave the name first mentioned. If the Moel made the error, then we still only consider the intended name. One should not name his child after a person who died young, before reaching the age of 50 years. If this is done, it is proper to add another name to the child. It is permissible to name a child after a person who died right after the birth of the new baby. An orphan who was born right after the death of his father should be named after his father. There is a custom to name a child after someone mentioned in the Torah portion of the week, such as Moshe, Moses, or Aaron, when the first portion of Exodus is being read. Some people have the custom to name a girl born on Purim Esther and a boy Mordechai. A child who dies before being named must be given a name before burial. It's a very interesting book, and contact us on what names mean. And people have uncles and aunts that are named certain things, and like I said, can you want to change from a boy's name to a girl's name and a girl's name to a boy's name? Like an aunt's to you have an aunt's name you want to name her a boy after. Can we do it? Is it permissible? What is the masculine and feminine, whatever would be derivation of these masculine and feminine names? So there's many questions. Surely can contact us if you have any questions. And of course, all Hebrew names do have a meaning, and you can. It's very interesting for your own self, because this is your name, and to find out what a Hebrew name. And many, of course, English names are derived from the Hebrew, as we found out. Like said, Michael and David, very popular names, of course. And people have just all kinds of good names that really are derived from the Bible, and they should know the source from them. And you're welcome to know the source. Just have to give us a ring, and we will tell you the source of your Jewish name. Now we talked about when a child is born and given a name. So now we're going to talk about educating the child, and this is from Dr. David Lazarson, who. At the end of this article, we're going to talk about a book that he wrote. Very interesting, very funny person, and is actually a friend of mine. And he's in education. He's a doctor of education. So this is what we're going to dedicate our next few minutes educating the whole child, a call for non-denominational prayer in the public schools. Children, my teacher said, interrupting our bell work to keep students occupied until class starts in the morning. Please stand for the pledge to the flag and the national anthem. It was always a challenge to try to finish my bell work before my pledge would begin. Usually I lost. No matter though, I had a few minutes after our class silent prayer. Okay, class, Mrs. J would say, take a minute for our silent prayer. Think of good thoughts. We had it timed. It lasted only about 10 seconds. Still, every morning she insisted on calling it the minute of silent prayer. It was a special ritual of the silent period. I prayed that so-and-so would get better, that my family should be healthy, that my team should win, and that I should ace my test. I was a student in the public schools then, and now I teach students in the system with learning and behavioral disabilities. After my class finishes bell work, I say, okay, gang, it's time for reading. No mention of the national anthem or pledges or silent prayers. It seems too empty, too cold, too parve. I miss the morning rituals. I can't help but think that students miss them too. When I was a student, public schools took a more active role in educating the whole child. Perhaps because they believed in the whole child, the schools devoted time, effort, and money in all areas of human child development, academic growth, social skills, character development, and even some moral training. Today, however, public schools have taken the notion of separation of church and state to a dangerous extreme. The school functions as an academic brain factory, ignoring the other components of the child, such as heart, body, personality, and soul. A kid goes to school today to get smart, and not to learn how to be a good person or a decent law-abiding citizen. This is good to a point. Indeed, the main goal of the school system should be one of academic growth and expanding the mind. Yet we shouldn't exclude emotional, social, physical, and moral education. Our children need guidance in all these areas. Unfortunately, many don't receive it at home, and they certainly don't get it on the streets. Most teachers and educators run away from these obligations. We tell ourselves it's a religious issue. Public school is not the place for religion. I maintain that teaching a child to be responsible to himself, to his peers, and to society has nothing to do with religious education. The problem is that we never stop to consider the difference between moral and religious education. Particularly today, the very word itself, morality, triggers the imagination into the fire and brimstone of the moral majority, which many people say are neither moral nor a majority. Morality in this article refers to responsibility. It means teaching a child to be responsible for his or her behavior. Webster's Dictionary defines moral as questions of right and wrong in conduct or behavior. A child who steals something from another child, or a child who breaks someone's nose for the fun of it, is not violating some social code or conduct. He is breaking his moral human obligations. To give a child bar mitzvah lessons or to teach a class on the book of Exodus is religious education. To teach a student the golden rule, do unto others as you would have others do unto you, is appropriate and in fact done in many a good public school. Still, many teachers claim that they can't teach morality or ethics. After all, it's too close to that dirty label of religion. Nevertheless, these same educators don't hesitate to properly remind the child that hitting isn't right, that stealing is wrong, or that honesty is the best policy. In other words, teachers do enforce moral and behavioral codes in their classrooms, whether they acknowledge it or not. We must face two realizations. First, that we do impart some moral ethical standards to our students. And second, there is a distinction between moral and religious education. While religion per se is delegated to the private school and home, moral training can take a meaningful role within the school system, both public and private. In recent years, there has been a greater emphasis on social and emotional development for our students, particularly for the special education population. Many new materials can be found. These materials are geared to enhance self-concept and build social skills. While these efforts are a step in the right direction, we have still failed to respond to the child's need for some moral, ethical training. The United States has the highest standard of education in the world, yet at the same time our crime rate is soaring. Youth and teenage crime is climbing at an alarming rate. Why are we afraid to walk the streets at night? Why are more and more families buying guns to protect themselves? We live in almost constant fear of each other. Society seems to be decaying right under our feet. We give our children the best education in the world. Where have we gone wrong? I believe that we have neglected one important area, an area so crucial that it affects the entire structure. This is the area of morality and ethics. We have only to look back 50 years to a system in a country that was advanced in almost all areas of human thought and study. Nazi Germany excelled in the arts and sciences. However, they ignored the vital component of morality or ethics. Call it what you will, look wherever it got them. Look where it got the rest of the world. Yet there is something significant that we can do to improve the situation, starting in our own backyard. I suggest that each morning children in the public schools say a non-denominational prayer mentioning in the name of God. The following is offered as a possibility. We thank God for this new day. May we grow to our fullest. May we learn, work, and play in the spirit of cooperation and brotherhood. This non-denominational prayer may be followed by a few seconds of silent prayer if the teacher so desires. Adults often respond to my suggestion with comments on, like, come on now. Kids can't handle such concepts. Don't you think that morality and ethics are a bit over their heads? My answer is an emphatic no. With a bit of guidance, in fact, they'll do a better job than many adults. In my years of service to public school education, I have found that my students have an instinctive, almost natural belief in God. They also possess a remarkable sense of right and wrong, enough to drive any well-meaning corrupted adult downright crazy. A few years ago, I had a junior high class of tough, streetwise, inner-city students with learning and emotional problems. The school was in the worst part of the city. Some students came to school with switchblades in their socks. One even brought his piece to school, a .22 caliber pistol. Not too surprisingly, every other word uttered by these students was a juicy four-letter dandy fit to be censored. It was difficult for them to adjust to the fact that the classroom was not the street corner. Many would slip up and swear in class. These same kids had no trouble, however, when it came to respecting their teacher, an observant Jew complete with yarmulke, beard, and tzitzits. Once, in fact, I had to say the morning prayers in my class. I simply shut the door and said, listen, guys, while you're doing your bell work, I've got some special prayers to say. Just keep it down, and I'll be done in a few minutes. I put in my tallis and tefillin and started the dramatics. My students sat there in a trance, eyes bulging out of their sockets. Finally, one exclaimed, Mr. Laz looks like an angel. I was in the middle of Shema, but I simply couldn't help laughing. Soon, however, they forgot about me and began quietly doing their bell work. Just when all was doing quite smoothly, a loud damn shouted to silence. One of my students was having trouble with a problem, and his natural reaction was to swear. I envisioned an all-out riot in the room, even as this student slammed his fist on his desk and repeated the word, this time even louder. Wonderful, I thought to myself. My principal will run in to restore law and order, and I'm in the back of the room in my tallis and tefillin. Shut up, man, my other students suddenly yelled back in rebuke. Can't you see Mr. Laz is saying his prayers? Ain't you got no respect? My students have also gotten used to the fact that I say a short blessing before and after I eat or drink something. Often I quietly mumble at the blessing to myself in a sort of half-whisper. This under-the-breath strategy might be within earshot of the Creator, but it's not good enough for my inner-city students. Hey, Mr. Laz, they remind me, you forgot to say your blessing. What's the matter with you, man? Okay, you win, I tell them, and I say the blessing out loud the way it's meant to be said, of course. So much for their insensitivity. So much for their inability to handle delicate issues. Perhaps children have this natural belief in God because they are more sensitive and honest than adults. Yet we have gone out of our way to silence this innate feeling in our children. The freedom of religion fought for by the founding fathers of this country we have distorted into freedom from religion. And we are now paying the consequences. Our schools have been producing educated youth devoid of any moral and ethical obligations. It's dog eat dog. Step on the next guy. Get ahead. The self becomes all important, pushing aside any notion of society's welfare. Since we have in fact taught our kids that God doesn't exist, who do they have to answer to? Parents? principals, police. There are a zillion ways to get around the authority figures, particularly if they get in your way. Asking a streetwise 10-year-old, many youth offenders have remarked that they never cared about getting caught. Furthermore, they see that the convicted criminal is soon back on the streets. The fault is not theirs. The blame lies in our all-American educational system, not to mention the penal system. The system sends a message to students that God is a taboo subject, never to be mentioned throughout their entire educational experience. The public school system tries to take responsibility for children's minds, and maybe their physical bodies to a small extent, but that's it. When it comes to satisfying their emotional social needs, they may send them to a guidance counselor a couple times a month. When it comes to treating their souls or consciences, they will have to get help somewhere else. Many districts are afraid or unwilling to allow children even a moment for a silent prayer. I guess the concept of prayer itself is too risque for them. After all, we wouldn't want our kids turning to some higher force and requesting a passing mark, or that their parents should be healthy. I'm sure, though, that some stubborn students sneak in a legitimate prayer or two during the school day. Perhaps we'll have thought monitoring machines one day so we can catch them in this subversive act. But it doesn't stop here. Some school districts don't let their students pledge allegiance to the flag or sing the national anthem. This is not just stilling their belief in God, it's preventing them from honoring their country's culture and traditions. Our forefathers actually believed in God and each other. Perhaps we should remove pictures of Washington, Lincoln, Kennedy, and Dr. King from our school walls. And why bother keeping a flag in school? Better yet, we could remove certain words from the dictionary like trust, belief, and prayer. We wouldn't want children discovering these silly ideas by accident, would we? The challenge is a great one. We must meet this challenge now before it is too late. Let us return the right of non-denominational prayer in the public schools to our children, as well as to the pledge to the flag and the national anthem. Those students who do not wish to participate in any of these activities should be respected, of course, and allowed to sit out. They can engage in quiet seat work while the others pause for a moment to reflect that there is indeed a God involved with this world. So here's a little bit of a synopsis of Dr. Lazarusson, but he calls himself Dr. Laz. It's called Skull Caps and Switchblades, Survival Stories of an Orthodox Jew Teaching in the Inner City. The scene is a black ghetto school in Buffalo, New York, but it could be any inner city school. What makes this scene so unusual? Well, if you put together the unlikely combination of a bearded, young, observant Jewish teacher, complete with yarmulke and tzitzis in a class of inner city learning disabled adolescents, what you get is a hilarious but touching diary that shows how a dedicated teacher overcomes the odds of being eaten alive by his class to develop a relationship that transcends that of merely student and teacher. Skull Caps and Switchblades is a remarkable but true account of Dr. David Lazarusson's experiences teaching a group of boys who share similar backgrounds. Most come from broken homes, some have criminal records, others on their ways to becoming juvenile delinquents, many who even witnessed actual murders. Rabbi Lazarusson, today the director of the Manhattan School, is an ingenious approach applied Talmudic precepts and methods to teaching his students and getting them to recognize their abilities and apply their learning to practical matters. Forming a classroom Boy Scout troop, he rewarded them for cooperating and trying and showing them that what he was made of. Dr. Lazarusson has since applied the experiences that he gained from teaching this group to work with the learning disabled in Jewish schools, with equally successful results. According to his story, we are all learning disabled in one respect or another, depending on where our weaknesses are centered. The approach is to concentrate on the strengths, to provide us with the confidence and self-respect to make the most of our abilities. I think that's an outstanding thing. And of course, Dr. Laz is an outstanding personality, as I know, like I am his personal friend. And it's interesting, he wrote a book about his experiences there, but he does have his feelings about what to do about education in the public schools, as we saw today. So that's very important. And we only have just a few minutes, so just a little quip about a few jokes. I know it's a little lighthearted over here. Have a little bit of a story. Try to make it a little fast, but the last few minutes. A chair, a table, and something to eat. A story. Many holy masters before they became rebbes traveled incognito around the Shtetlach, villages in Eastern Europe, almost entirely inhabited by Jews, of the Pale of Settlement, investigating the conditions under which Jews lived, how they earned a living, how much Torah they studied, if they truly got to fulfill the commandment of loving kindness. Mendel, destined to become the Rebbe of Vizhnitz, started traveling from his father's house in Kosov when he was 13 years old. He traveled for 2 years throughout the Podolia region of Poland, making his rounds in the vicinity of the Shtetlach of Kitov and Vizhnitz. As he approached one of these Shtetlach, a small 8-year-old girl always came out to greet him. She would run to welcome him, beckon him to follow her home, and bring out a little table and chair, some cake and a bottle of wine. She would sing, "Sit down in the shade of my house and eat some cake and drink some wine." He would always rest on the little chair outside the girl's house. While he ate and drank, she sang and danced. She was so happy to feed him. He began to depend on her hospitality, and she waited eagerly for his visits. One day, amidst the dancing and singing, he called to her, "What is your name, sweet child?" She answered, "My name is Rivkala." "What is your name?" "My name is Mendel." Rivka continued, "Promise me, Mendel, that whenever you pass this way, you will stop for some cake and wine." Mendel promised her that he would not forget, and Rivka continued to look forward to his visits. Mendel returned to Kosov, to the house of his father, Rabbi Chaim. A match was arranged between him and Miriam, the daughter of Rabbi Yisrael Aruzhin, on condition that he commit himself to studying for the next 10 years. When he was 25 years old, he was invited to take over the Hasidic leadership in Vizhnitz. As the years passed, Rabbi Mendel of Vizhnitz became famous the world over. His followers believed that his prayers cured the ill, that his caring and concern mended broken souls. People streamed to Vizhnitz from all over the area to seek his advice and to receive his blessing. When Rivkala turned 18, she was afflicted with a disease that paralyzed her completely. Her joyous song ceased. Her parents sought the help of the most eminent doctors, but they were unable to suggest a remedy for her ailment. Rivka refused to give up hope that she would dance again. She lay on her bed recalling how, as a child, she used to dance and sing for an entrant stranger, how she used to bring him some cake to eat and a bottle of wine to drink. People who passed through her shtetl spoke enthusiastically of a certain Rabbi Mendel of Vizhnitz, whose prayers cured them. She remembered that her friendly stranger's name was Mendel. Rivka imagined that he had become the famous Rabbi Mendel. She pleaded for her husband to take her to Rabbi Mendel for a blessing. "I have this feeling that the itinerant stranger who used to stop by this house on his travels, the one to whom I used to serve cake and wine when I was a small child, the one for whom I danced and sang, is Rabbi Mendel. Please, please take me to see him." Rivka's parents scoffed at her. But years passed. She refused to see her special friend. Her parents remained skeptical that any cure could be found. We have to cut this story short, but in the end, of course, the Rabbi Mendel sees her and prays for her, and of course that she becomes better. And this was all he said, because her hospitality to a stranger, we should never forget the good, and this maybe we can sum up in full circle. This is the proper education of a child. She should want to do good and nice things to people, and that, of course, will be rewarded to herself and her parents, to the whole community. Thank you very much.